Training camp is finally over and the Carolina Panthers initial 53-man roster is complete. So in this video, we are going to go over everything that has went down over the last 48 hours, be it cuts, injury reserves, surprises, and everything in between. And we are going to get into all of that right after this.
I'm from the foe. You dig?
Welcome to The Way I See It with Jamario Rashad. This is a Carolina Panthers fan channel. Please do me a favor by hitting the like button and please make sure you subscribe as I am on my road to 3K. Trying to make sure my channel continues to grow before these games get started very soon. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get to what went down. So first, we are going to start with the guys who this is unfortunately the end of the road for these guys. They were either waived or they were just flat out cut from the team. And I'm not going to focus on all of these guys as there is a great number and a large number of people that are honestly just cannon fodder that we knew weren't going to be on the team, that we knew were going to go elsewhere after the preseason. But there are a few standout players that in fact are not that are no longer with my Carolina Panthers that I would like to discuss. Firstly being Terrace Marshall Jr., this up and down ride that has been our second round pick just 4 short years ago is finally over. He was released before the 4 o'clock deadline today at the Cutdown deadline, and he will be moving on. Many speculating that he will reunite with his former offensive coordinator and/or coach, which I forget which it be, Joe Brady, I believe, up in Buffalo. But with Terrace Marshall being gone, that I believe proves a lot of the speculation in terms of why he was getting so much volume throughout the preseason and why he seemed to be such a featured guy over the past month or so. It is very common knowledge and it is on wax that Terrace Marshall was unhappy with his position on the team last season. It getting so bad that our former coach Frank Reich, forgetting that he didn't even activate the guy to the active roster on a game week and just honestly just saying, well, that's my bad. I just forgot about it. That's how tough and how rough it got for Terrace Marshall last season. So one could not really be upset with him requesting a trade away from the team, understanding those circumstances. Reports have also come up over the past few weeks that the Carolina Panthers were continuing to look to shop him after his breakout performances, not only notably in the joint practice against the Jets, going off against their starting corners, but also in this most recent game, leading the team in receptions and also getting a touchdown, showing out. Many would assume that he would have at least some type of trade value, and that would lead to some team out there biting on a trade for Terrace Marshall Jr. Unfortunately, that did not come to fruition as he did not get traded last season, and I am under the belief that Dan Morgan could not find a suitable trade partner for him over this past month, despite how good he has played. So with that, I believe both sides just agreed that it is best that they go their separate ways, and Terrace Marshall is unfortunately no longer a Carolina Panther. I had a lot of hopes for this guy. I saw the potential that he put forth out there in the 10 games under Steve Wilkes a short year or so ago, and I thought that was going to continue, but unfortunately that is over. So Terrace Marshall Jr., hey, good luck to you. I am not a hater. I hope you ball out wherever you go. You were a victim of the circumstances just like most of these other players, and hey man, I hope you land on your feet somewhere. So the second player I want to discuss that was cut from the team is somebody that excuse me, is a lot less notable of a name, that being guard Jack Anderson. Now, over the past 2 to 3 games, I believe he got picked up after the first preseason game on short notice, came in about a few short days before the second preseason game, and in his short stint here, in his 2 games, he was the highest graded Carolina Panthers offensive lineman that we had, a PFF grade of over 90 in 1 week, and he was still leading, although that came down just a short week after that. Many speculated that he could be a guy that Dave Canales and the brass in charge could see coming in off the street and being a potential replacement for Chandler Zavala, who was drafted in the 4th round last season. But with Zavala actually starting the last preseason game and actually leaving the preseason game with the rest of the starters, that was pretty much an indication that he was going to be safe on the team. And unfortunately, the casualty that had to be cut because of Zavala making the team is going to be Jack Anderson. I believe that he is potentially going to be a very strong candidate to hopefully be brought back to the practice squad, as he has shown that even thrown into the fire on short notice, he can be a very suitable offensive lineman. And depth being something, depth at the offensive line positions being something that we are desperately needing. See last season, I believe Jack Anderson, it is very important that although he got cut, that he remains on the roster and becomes available to be activated at the behest of the team whenever he is available. Now, this third name is somebody that was getting a lot of work when in training camp. He was actually out there practicing with the ones, and he flashed each and every week that we had a preseason game over the last month. That being defensive tackle TJ Smith. I believe he led the team in sacks, and he probably had the most pressures. Don't quote me on that. I'm just assuming because he was able to get to the quarterback so often, but I might be a little bit off on that. This is a guy that, in my opinion, has the potential to be a lot better than the guy that we paid last year, being Shai Tuttle. He shows up on film and flashes a lot more often than Shai Tuttle. Be it as it may, he was playing against backups. When a guy is able to elevate and show that he is just consistently better than guys that are twos, one could only surmise that he would be at least serviceable if he was forced out there to play sometime with the ones and against some starting offensive linemen. So it was surprising to me that TJ Smith got cut, but not totally surprising because we still do have a lot of money wrapped up in Shai Tuttle. We brought over Ashawn Robinson, and in this particular scheme that Jiro Evero likes to run, defensive tackles are at a premium, and us having a lot of them on the roster is something that is very suitable, and it is what makes the defense go a lot of the time, getting that pressure up front, as this is a bend but don't break type of defense. I thought he could be very helpful in that, but unfortunately the defensive staff thought otherwise. Now, finally, this last guy is somebody that has become very popular, not only for what he's able to do on the field, scoring a touchdown in this most recent preseason game and getting the starting spot in that game, but also for the way that he presents himself, having one of the most notable and the most quotable press conferences in recent memory for the Carolina Panthers, just being somebody that is clearly a strong-minded, a strong man of strong faith, that is somebody that is a very, very valuable locker room guy. So to see him get cut is something very, very, it's very shocking. But at the same time, if you look at the last 4 years of his career, he has been pretty much inactive on and off of practice squads up with the San Francisco 49ers before he decided to make the switch from the wide receiver position to the tight end position. So this is still a transition for him. He did come over as a Frank Reich disciple last year, and he is a holdover. So he is somebody that does not have any ties to this new staff. So the chances of him making the team were slim to begin with, but the way that he ingratiated himself with the offense, the fan base, and with the media, it was easy to assume that he may just be somebody that would stick around, if not for production's sake, but at least to be a voice in the locker room and to be a leader of the young guys, be it Jatavian Sanders, Tommy Tremble, and I can't say Ian Thomas, but Jatavian Sanders and Ian Thomas. But this is a guy who has not necessarily been a tight end, does not have much experience with the tight end position, so he could give them in-depth analysis as to what it means to be a pass catcher or what it means to be an offensive player out there. But he does not have enough experience at all to be able to instill any type of actual practical knowledge or practical things that these guys can actually go out there and apply on the field. So taking all of that into account, I can understand why Jordan Matthews is no longer on the roster. But this is a guy that I admittedly grew to like in his short time here with the Carolina Panthers, man. But those are the four players that surprised me the most that they were cut. And before we get to the guys that are on the PUP list, the IR list, I want to remind you that the way I see it is now sponsored by BetUS. If you use the link in the description of this video, you will get up to 125% back on your initial bonus. So please, if you would like to support this channel, the best way you could do so is by using the affiliate link and putting a little extra money in my pocket. I appreciate that. BetUS, it is now legal here in North Carolina, which I know most of my fan base is based out of. So go ahead and get your promo on and get your bet on, man. But we're about to go ahead and get back to the rest of the video, man. So now I want to discuss the guys that are still technically on the team, but they are not going to be on the active game day roster come next Sunday when we make the trip to New Orleans, man. So first of all, the person that I have to focus on this list the most, because I believe it is going to be, or he is going to be the one that receives the most attention for getting this designation. Unfortunately, Jonathan Brooks, our second round, supposed to be all-star running back, and I don't say that maliciously. I'm just saying he's supposed to be a superstar or an all-star. He drafted that high. He's supposed to be very good. Unfortunately, he is not going to be with us for at least the first 4 games of the season, and then we are not sure how long it's going to take him to ramp back up ramp up into football or NFL football shape to begin with before we're actually able to see him out there on the field, man. So I believe a big talking point of this happening is going to be the fact that the Carolina Panthers, arguably and just objectively speaking, again, not trying to be malicious, but I believe it's reasonable to say that if they were looking to draft players high in this current draft to come in and immediately help alongside of Bryce Young, Jonathan Brooks could potentially be looked at as a mistake if that was your sole purpose for this upcoming draft. You drafted a guy who you already have not only a nearly 1,000-yard rusher at his position previously, but you doled out the highest running back contract to Miles Sanders, who is the highest paid running back the most recent offseason. You have money wrapped up in these guys, and you also have a dynamic Swiss Army knife in Raheem Blackshear. One could assume that you could have double dipped at wide receiver, knowing that Adam Thielen is 34 years old, knowing that there is no guarantee whatsoever that at the conclusion of this season that Deontay Johnson is going to re-sign with this team. If you lose those two guys at the conclusion of this season, you were then stuck with Jonathan Mingo, who you tried to replace this season, and Xavier Legette, who is a rookie who is still a complete unknown, and we're not sure what he's going to do this season. You could have brought in yet another highly drafted wide receiver to add competition to the room, not only this year, but to look forward to having bodies in those places for the upcoming seasons. Running backs are players that has been proven over time and time again. If you could get somebody that is serviceable, you can have a productive running attack. I 1000% understand that there are levels to this, and there are certainly players that are better than others. But if you are looking to maximize what your offense can be, I believe in the position that you got an injured running back who isn't going to be able to help you in his rookie season, and that's going to lose a year off of his already pretty highly paid second round contract. I believe this could have potentially been better served drafting another wide receiver for the reasons that I just laid out. I am not against Jonathan Brooks, and I totally wish and want for him to reach all the heights that we want him to reach in the upcoming seasons. I hope that he can bounce back and be better than ever in the NFL. But just speaking objectively, he is not going to be a body that is going to make much of a difference this season. And even when he does come back, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, I still envision him being running back 3, if not only for the reason of his health and coming off of an ACL. This is the 4th year of Chuba Hubbard's contract. He is getting paid, I believe, nearly $4 million. That is alongside Miles Sanders, who is in the biggest cap hit year of his contract. Those two players accounting for over $10 million in your running back room. I just couldn't imagine in any scenario that they were going to be thrown by the wayside, owing them that much money to try to justify drafting an injured running back to try to play over them. It never made sense. It still doesn't make sense. And hopefully it works out in the future. But as of right now, this is looking a bit head scratching, man. So I'm gonna move on from the Jonathan Brooks point, but I wanted to get that out there because as of right now, it's not looking the best in the short term. Long term, hey man, God knows. But the next player I want to discuss that is on either the PUP injury reserve, any of these not playing lists, is going to be DJ Wanham, the player that we brought in to play opposite of Jadeveon Clowney. This is somebody that we have not seen at any point during the offseason. OTAs, training camp, mini camp, anything, because he himself is also coming off of an injury. I believe a quad or a pec injury. I'm not like I don't necessarily know, but either way, it is something so debilitating to him that he's not actually able to be out there on the field as it stands. And honestly, just like I had to say with the Jonathan Brooks thing, this is not to be malicious, but it's just to be objective. When you look at the fact that the Carolina Panthers had the opportunity as recently as a few weeks ago to bring in the likes of somebody like a Yannick Ngakoue, but it comes down to the fact that we don't have the money on the books to be able to pay a player to come in for a year or two like that. You have to look at the fact that a deal was doled out to a player like this who is coming off his best season ever, aside from the league leader in sacks in Danielle Hunter, and he was only able to put up 8 sacks in a career year. Expecting him to come in here and be a just any more than serviceable pass rush option aside from Jadeveon Clowney at the dollar amount that we spent to bring him here, and him costing us the opportunity to sign players that are not even arguably just absolutely better than he is unfortunate and has to be looked at in the short term as it currently stands as a bad move, because this is not going to help us in the near future. This is money that was doled out in an offseason that was supposed to help the upcoming team in the short-term future, and that is not how it's going to pan out. So unfortunately, we will have to wait to see what DJ Wanham is like when he returns off of his injury, how effective he is whenever he actually ramps it back up, and if he's even going to be able to reach up to the status that he was before, which honestly was not that great of a pass rusher. So I hope the best for DJ Wanham, and somebody's gonna get cut when he gets activated, man. But I'm just not seeing it as of right now, man. So next we're gonna talk about Amari Barno. Now, this is a player that I pounded the table for a lot last season when I learned about the defensive scheme that Ejiro Evero was bringing, and how an outside linebacker that brings a lot of speed is going to be at a premium and could potentially be a very, very good pass rush threat. I thought that description fit Amari Barno to a T, but unfortunately, as we saw throughout the entirety of last season, Barno was barely even on the field. He's clearly not favored by the defensive staff, and he tore his ACL, I believe, in the final game of the season last year. I truly don't really understand why Amari Barno is being held over on the roster at this point. He was not a highly drafted player. He was drafted in the 6th round 2 years ago at this point, and he has only showed small flashes of being a potential rotation guy. Him being somebody that is going to be put on this list and indicates that whenever he actually is able to be to whenever he actually is healthy and activated, that means unfortunately one of the players that is currently on the 53-man roster is going to have to be waived and moved to the practice squad. Once we get to those players later on in this video, it's going to be hard for me to imagine which one of these players I truly believe Amari Barno deserves to be on the active roster over. One of the only theories I have as to why he could still be on the roster in this capacity, injured and all, is because they're not sure when they're going to get their special teams ace and Sam Franklin back. All pro special teams guy, Sam Franklin. Amari Barno, although he is an outside linebacker, edge rush guy, he is somebody with 4.3 speed and has proven that he could be a gunner on special teams. I'm not sure if they're just keeping both guys around or keeping Amari Barno around as insurance. If Sam Franklin is going to be out for a little bit longer, they can bring this guy back, knowing that he could play that role, play that role under the special teams. But that's just a little theory that I have. But outside of that, I can't justifiably see a reason why Amari Barno is still going to be taking up a spot on this team this upcoming season. It honestly just does not make too much sense to me. But outside of that, man, those are really the notable names I wanted to talk about that are either going to be on the physically unable to perform list or just injury reserve. Outside of that, just one quick note, Dane Jackson, he was signed to this team for a reason. So one of the cornerbacks that is on the active roster as of today is going to be cut whenever Dane Jackson is actually physically able to play again and able to be elevated to the active roster. So this is not going to be a designation that I believe impacts us too much, because we were able to sign an additional cornerback just last week, man. So now let's move on to the players the 25 players, I believe, that are on the initial roster for the offensive side of the ball. We are keeping 10 offensive linemen, 3 tight ends. Shockingly so, even with cutting Terrace Marshall, we are keeping 7 wide receivers, 3 running backs, and of course only 2 quarterbacks, as the NFL did just recently release or implement a rule penalizing or something like that about the 3rd quarterback. I pretty much knew at that point it's no reason to have Jack Plummer on the roster. Emergency quarterback, my ass. Bruh's not good enough. So the only person that really jumps out to me I guess 2 people. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I thought that Chandler Zavala was somebody that potentially could be on the bubble and could be on the outs with this staff. Dave Canales coming in and saying he does not have any emotional ties to the guys that were previously on this roster. I guess that doesn't apply to when you actually had to, put draft capital into these guys. I understand guys that you might have signed or short-term guys, but as I always believe, I don't care who comes in to coach the team. I don't care who is the GM. Teams want to justify why they invested their draft picks or their financial capital in the players that they have in the past. So if you want to have a blueprint or at least a cheat sheet as to who is probably going to make the roster, follow where the investments went into. They are not going to cut players very often that they have a lot of money invested into, and they are not going to cut players that they recently drafted in the last 2 or 3 drafts. So I believe that is why Chandler Zavala probably made this team over Jack Anderson, who, although has not played as many games in the Carolina Panthers uniform, so it is a smaller sample size, I believe he showed in his short stint here that he has the potential to be better than Zavala, and unfortunately we're just not going to get the opportunity to see if he is. But outside of Chandler Zavala, the only name that pops up as an absolute surprise, but I believe it's honestly very justified due to the circumstances of the offensive line room, is Andrew Rahm. He is a undrafted center out of Oklahoma. As you all know, Austin Corbett was going to be moving over from his guard position to be playing center for the first time in the NFL. We did not have a natural center on the roster whatsoever, even though Corbett was making this transition. With as good as Raheem showed to be in his short stint in the preseason, he showed that he could learn in a short time. He could hold up in the middle, and he also got the start as Austin Corbett had a baby. Him and his wife had a baby. Congratulations to them during the game on Saturday. So Raheem got the start, and you could see no drop off with his performance whatsoever compared to anybody else that could have been out there as a starter. Having that kind of depth behind somebody that is going to be a first timer at the position is very, very valuable. So I completely understand why the Carolina Panthers chose to keep Andrew Rahm around. Andrew Rahm. I'm going to say, excuse me if I switch it up. I'm just trying to say it right. But Andrew Rahm, I can definitely see why he stays around, and I believe he is going to be a very valuable depth piece. Outside of that, Cade Mays stays around. Yash Nyman is going to be your swing tackle, and that is your offensive line group. It's not really too many surprises there. It's just the one key addition of Rom. But then we move over to the tight ends where they only kept three. I believe only keeping three tight ends on the roster is what is allowing them at this current time to have 7 wide receivers on the roster. Now, those three tight ends are Tommy Tremble, Jatavian Sanders, and unfortunately, the guy that all of Panthers Nation has been wishing off the team for years now, and all they do is keep giving him more money, Ian Thomas. Now, Tommy Tremble, it's common knowledge that he was going to be the starter this year, coming off of not a super productive, but one of his best seasons yet. Coming into the final year of his contract, the Carolina Panthers are going to look and see what they have in this guy and see if he is going to potentially be a guy that could hang around, become a pass catcher, and be tight end one, or if he can reasonably extend his contract and be a tight end 2 behind who they drafted this year in Jatavian Sanders. Now, this isn't a depth chart, so I don't look at this as who is like depth, but Jatavian Sanders is on the roster. Of course, he was drafted this season, and Ian Thomas, who we haven't seen over the preseason, who suffered some type of injury. He is going to stay around. It's really nothing else we can say. It's nothing we can fuss, moan, do all of this. Ian ain't going nowhere. We can move on from that. So 7 wide receivers: Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Legette, Emir Smith-Marset, David Moore, and Jalen Coker. Now, the last 3 names on this list, I can honestly just look at you straight to the face and say there's absolutely no way that they are better than Terrace Marshall Jr., but I understand wanting to get guys that are in here with a fresh start and potentially just fitting the scheme for Dave Canales a little bit better. I don't understand keeping Emir Smith-Marset and David Moore, as they do both serve the same purpose to potentially be a special teams ace and just somebody that could play on these gadget plays. The only thing I could assume as to why they're both on the active roster is that David Moore is somebody that Dave Canales is more comfortable with and has proven that he could actually go out there and play wide receiver, as he did show that in the most previous preseason game, going out there and being, I believe, the leading wide receiver on the team behind Terrace Marshall. I believe he just has the trust to actually be a part of the offense more so than Emir Smith-Marset, but keeping Emir Smith-Marset here to be a special teams guy is where his value comes in. The biggest shocker is the fact that undrafted free agent Jalen Coker did in fact make this roster, which pretty much indicates to me that the Carolina Panthers were worried about Jalen Coker not clearing waivers and getting signed to the active roster of one of the other teams out there in the NFL. It is on wax, and it is common knowledge. I did hear Jalen Coker even mention in an interview himself, with him being a potential later round draft pick, when it comes to those 6th or 7th round guys, a lot of the time their agent will actually call teams and ask for them not to draft these guys just so they have the opportunity to pick where they go. And because those undrafted free agent contracts can sometimes have more guaranteed money than a seventh round pick. That was the case for a guy like Jalen Coker, and fortunately he chose to come to the Carolina Panthers. What this indicates to me is one of those teams that were probably going to draft Jalen Coker before actually being told not to draft him are itching at the chance to see him get cut and to add him to the roster because they had such a conviction about him prior to the draft anyway. And this team is not going to take any chances with letting him slip through the cracks like that. A 22-year-old guy that is going to be a developmental player that our greatest wide receiver ever, Steve Smith, said was the best wide receiver in this, not the best wide receiver, the best route runner in this draft with endless potential. That's a guy that the team is going to keep around. And although it is a surprise to me with the amount of guaranteed money they gave to him as a undrafted free agent, I don't find it that shocking that he's going to stick around. It's just the fact that he's going to stick around as a seventh wide receiver, which is very, very uncommon. Then the usual running backs: Chuba, Miles, Raheem Blackshear, the same guys that we had on the roster last year, and of course our quarterbacks, Bryce Young and Andy Dalton. So now we got to get into talking about the defense before we wrap everything up with this video, man. So first, we decided to keep 7 defensive linemen, which is honestly surprising. That is a very, very large number, and there are 2 names that jump off the screen to me immediately as somebody that I am kind of as players that I'm kind of just questioning, the validity of them staying around. That being Jaden Crumedy and Jaden Peavy, the 2 Jadens. Now, Jaden Crumedy is somebody that I believe was our 7th round draft pick this season, and he has not flashed much to me whatsoever in the preseason. I haven't heard much about him coming out of camp, and with him being drafted so late in the draft, it's pretty much just a flyer that was taken on him anyway. Now, I do have a small conspiracy theory when it comes to this guy making the roster as well. With Dan Morgan being a first-time GM and this being the first time that he goes through an actual draft, last week he traded our 6th round draft pick that we recently drafted, whose name is escaping me right now, to the Seattle Seahawks for quarterback Michael Jackson. But I find it hard to believe that Dan Morgan would be willing to part ways with 2 of the draft picks that he made less than just a few months ago before their first season even starts. I know that, everybody wants to live and it's a meritocracy and, the best player wins. It's not like that all the time. It's a business, and that's my understanding for why in the world Jaden Crumedy would make the team over the likes of a TJ Smith, who clearly was just a better player, who, yes, was a bit older, but with that comes a little bit more experience there. That's the only reason I can truly see him being on the team over a guy like that. And to keep it completely a buck with you, I have no idea who Jaden Peavy is. I don't recall hearing Bruh's name in reports. I don't recall seeing him in preseason. I have no idea who this dude is. So, yeah, congrats to him. I just don't know who this man is. But, hey, that's what's up, man. Jadeveon Clowney, he is going to be the pass rush for this season. DJ Johnson, Kaylavon Chason, and Eku Leota round out the outside linebacking edge rushers. DJ Johnson, third-round pick out of from Oregon last season, still looking to even look like a serviceable NFL player. Kaylavon Chason, a 100% bust up until this point, but again, follow the money. We gave him money to be a free agent acquisition this offseason. He was going to make the team no matter what. And Eku Leota is somebody that I believe is one of the players that actually earned his way onto the team. Constantly coming up as somebody that was disrupted throughout camps, practices, and flashing on film in the preseason. And he is just a job well done. And congratulations to him, as this is that's just he earned that. Outside linebackers: Shaq Thompson, Josie Jewell, Claudin Sherrills, and Trevin Wallace. No real surprise there, but I do want to take the time to give a special shout out to Claudin Sherrills, as he is one of the only players, or he is currently the only player still on the active roster that came to the NFL from an HBCU. I myself am an HBCU alum, so I always have to show special appreciation for the guys that make it to the league with all the odds stacked against them, with all the opinions that they are not worth as much as everybody else that coming out of the draft, or that their football, a guy like Claudin Sherrills that was fighting for a spot on the loaded New York Jets on the New York Jets defensive roster last season, was picked up off their practice squad by the Carolina Panthers, and just one season later is signed to the active roster and is clearly going to be a very active participant, as he was arguably just as effective as Claudin Sherrills in the preseason. Just a special shout out to him. I mean, just as impactful as Trevin Wallace. Shout out to Claudin Sherrills, man. And Trevin Wallace, I was questioning the pick on draft night because it seemed to be a little bit questionable in that spot. But for what I have seen, he is somebody that flies around the field like a missile. Although he will miss a tackle here or there, he is usually the first hat to the ball. I appreciate what he's been able to do in terms of his development in such a short time. And I believe he will be a very valuable asset to this team in the near future, as we see the departure of Josie Jewell. Hopefully, in my opinion, we get at least 4 or 5 more years out of Shaq Thompson, the likes of Demario Davis down there with the Saints, man. Don't just kick him off because of age, man. If he's impactful, he's impactful. But I would like to see Trevin Wallace, just progress into a player that could play alongside him in the future, man. Now we have 5 cornerbacks currently on the 53. J.C. Horn, Michael Jackson, Troy Hill, Deshaun Jameson, and this year's 5th round draft pick Shaw Smith-Wade. As I mentioned earlier in the video, when Dane Jackson, who was another offseason acquisition, does come off the injury list, one of these players is going to be either relegated to the practice squad or cut altogether. I can honestly say with almost certainty that is going to be Deshaun Jameson. He came in as an undrafted free agent and signed to us last season off somebody else's practice squad. I believe it was the 49ers. He has potentially been on the bubble fighting for a spot with DiCaprio Bootle, who was unfortunately cut just today. When Dane Jackson comes back, I believe that Deshaun Jameson will probably stick around on the practice squad, but he won't be an active participant on the 53 game in and game out. Just because Shaw Smith-Wade was a draft pick, and he needs the reps, he needs the time, and they would like for his progression to his progression takes precedent over Deshaun Jameson's, man. So finally, we are going to talk about the safeties, man. I know this video has been long. I didn't take any notes. All of this is just stuff off the dome, my initial thoughts. I didn't want anything to be rehearsed. I just wanted to throw the camera on and get to it. I've been talking for almost 40 minutes now, man. So I will go ahead and wrap this up. We have 5 safeties that are going to be rostered. Xavier Woods, newly free agent acquisitions, Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, last year's 6th round pick, and Jamie Robinson, who many thought was on the bubble and could potentially be out this season. Again, follow the investments. He was drafted. They want to make sure that they prove right on their investments. Jamie Robinson is back, and an undrafted free agent out of Texas A&M, somebody that has been flashing for the better part of the last month, showing out in camp against our QB, showing out in joint practices, and having a pick in this most recent preseason game, that being Damani Richardson. Congratulations to him, who is going to be bringing up the 5th and final safety spot on the active 53-man roster. But with that being said, those are the guys that are going to be your 2024-2025 Carolina Panthers, man. I believe this roster is not complete. It is fluid throughout the season, and as we have first priority on the waiver wire, I believe that a lot of these spots are going to switch before we get to the actual game day. And in my opinion, I don't believe, even though it would be my hope and my prayer that we get a pass rusher with that first overall waiver spot, I don't believe that somebody that would actually be a serviceable or let's just say a good pass rusher that could come in and give you solid production is going to be getting waived or is going to slip through the cracks the way that we picked up a guy like a Frankie Louvu off the streets like a few years ago. I know he's not a pass rusher, but just using that as an example, I believe we're more likely to find a linebacker or somebody else to help fill out the cornerback room that slips through the cracks and get waived by another team for a myriad of reasons, much more so than we would a pass rusher. So although I'm hoping to get another pass rusher, I think it's more than likely that we find another DB with our pole position on the waiver wire. And I just think that is probably going to take us into the end of all of these moves and fill out the team before we get some football started just in less than 2 short weeks, man. But what do you all think about the initial 53-man roster? Were you surprised by any of the cuts? Did any of your guys unfortunately get the boot? Or who are the surprise players on the team? Do you think there's any mistakes? Do you think that any of these players won't even be on the team in a few short weeks, man? Whatever you think, leave your comments down in the comment section, and I will be sure to get back with you then, man. But until next time, I am Jamario Rashad. This is the way I see it, and I'm out. Peace.